Good morning, everyone, and a happy Tuesday. Incorporating some feedback that I've received. So we'll start off with 3 highlights that you can look out for in this episode. So the first is what Howard Marks thinks. We'll briefly touch upon that. You'll be surprised to hear the best performing commodity. And the third is SoftBank's big operating loss. Let's get started. US stocks soared on rising hopes of a vaccine. The S&P 500 jumped more than 3% to the highest level since March, and Dow added 900 points. Now, in terms of treasuries, bonds sank and the 10-year yields jumped about 8 basis points. The same risk-on rally hit the dollar, which fell against every G10 pair except for the yen. Asian futures are pointing to a higher opening. In terms of sectors, 6 of the S&P 500 sectors rose more than 4%. Energy led the gain with a 7.6% gain, driven by surge in oil prices. More on the vaccine. Moderna, which is an American biotech company, reported a very positive early stage human trial on the coronavirus vaccine. Now, all 45 participants who received the vaccine produced the COVID-19 antibodies. There is nothing more valuable than a medical solution, but Moderna admitted that if all goes well, it will be early 2021 when the vaccine is ready for the market. WTI jumped. So WTI jumped to a 2-month high, while Brent also rose about $35 a barrel for the first time since the 9th of April. One big factor for this jump was the Chinese oil demand is almost back to pre-virus levels at about 13 million barrels a day. Gold futures fell from a 4-week high. Iron ore jumped, erasing all this year's losses as supply concerns grow and demand from steel mills in China recovers. Orange juice prices advanced, making it this year's best performing commodity as Americans seek to boost their immune systems. So that was an interesting commodity move. The Fed support for corporate debt prices is only temporary, and distress will sweep through the credit market when it inevitably steps back. This is what Mr. Howard Marks said. Can the Fed keep it forever? The co-chairman of the Oaktree Capital made a remark. Now, he believes stocks and bonds are selling at prices they won't sell if the Fed were not the dominant force. If Fed pulls back, we would all take over as buyers, but I don't think at these levels. So these are some comments from the legendary credit investor. Now, Jerome Powell also reiterated that the Fed is prepared to use everything in its toolbox and will leave interest rates near zero until the economy is back on track. Both he and Steve Mnuchin released prepared remarks ahead of the Tuesday's virtual hearing before the Senate Banking Committee. So he said, we expect economic conditions to improve in the 3rd and 4th quarters. That is what the Treasury Secretary said. Now, we saw data from Japan. Japan contracted on an annualized basis 3.4%. The expectation is for a 20% decline in the next quarter. Moving on to equities. SoftBank posted a 13 billion operating loss, 9 billion of an overall loss for the most recent fiscal year. It showed that how much the Japanese company once wanted the technology investment fund has dragged it down. The company reported over 17 billion in unrealized losses on investments. Nearly 10 billion came from 2 companies, Uber and WeWork. Jack Ma, the Alibaba co-founder, resigned from SoftBank's board. SoftBank is trying to shore up its cash holdings and stock price. SoftBank said it's raising about 11.5 billion by pledging to sell Alibaba shares through financial derivatives. Baidu surges in post-market trading after predicting revenue in the current quarter will be as much as 27.3 billion yuan. Consensus was for 25.61 billion yuan. Walmart is expected to post COVID-driven comp sales growth not seen in almost 2 decades when it reports earnings before the US Open on Tuesday. So demand for food and household items will likely drive a 9.6% jump in the key metric. That is what the analysts are expecting. Home Depot and Kohl's will also be reporting. Now, Moderna is selling shares overnight at 75 to 77.50 each. The price represents about 6.3 to 3.1% discount to Monday's close. So they're using the positive momentum to sell some shares. Vedanta's board approved the plan by its biggest shareholder, Anil Agarwal, to take the metal firm private. In terms of rates, the US Treasury market faces the first sale of the 20-year bond since 1986 on Wednesday, ahead of the new paper arriving and reflecting the general risk-on tone. The yield on the current 30-year bond rose about 14 basis points to close at about 1.45. Now, one important observation has been made by T.S. Lombard, which says that treasuries are still a high yielder among sovereign bonds. Furthermore, for the first time in 2 years, FX hedged US yields for Japanese investors have now turned positive, now further enhancing the attractiveness of treasuries. On Forex, the best performing currencies were Australian and New Zealand dollars. Now, this is despite the record low New Zealand PMI. The China is an important factor for these currencies. So on the one hand, you have the US-China trade relations worsen after US announced a tight ban on the Huawei chip sales, and China warned that they will retaliate. However, both the currencies were up because the Chinese President Xi Jinping said that he'll do everything in the power to provide information on the crisis. They pledged about $2 billion to help countries respond to the COVID-19 over the next 2 years. He also indicated that when the vaccine is developed, it will be made a good public good. Now, remember that China has developed more than any other country in terms of vaccines. It's tested it on more than 2,000 people, and they are in phase 2 and moved to phase 3 in July and August. Moderna's vaccine, on the other hand, is only in phase 1. So that is some positive comments that came in from China itself. Lastly, euro soared against all major currencies during the New York session after German Chancellor Merkel and French President Macron proposed a 500 billion euro recovery fund to offer grants to countries and regions hit hardest by the COVID-19. Now, they're also considering giving the European Commission authorization to borrow money under the European Union's name, which puts them one step closer to euro bonds. Because if approved, this would allow EU to raise debt jointly. Now that is your market update, and I hope you have a good day, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you so much.